distinguished guests, and ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to CCG Global Dialogue events. I'm Luo Yan, the Communications Director of CCG. First, let me take a moment to introduce the CCG Global Dialogue series events as a platform dedicated to fostering global exchange and insights. This series of events has a proud history of bringing together distinguished voices from across the world. Our past guests include notable figures such as Graham Allison, the founding dean of the Harvard Kennedy School and the mind behind the Thucydides trap theory; Joseph Nye, the professor at Harvard University and renowned as the father of the soft power; Gabriela Ramos, Assistant Director General of the UNESCO; and Pascal Lamy, the former Director General of the WTO and the President of the Paris Peace Forum. These conversations have enriched our understanding of global issues, and today we continue this tradition with another extraordinary guest and focus on our theme, Inclusive Leadership for a Fragmented World, Women in Global Governance. It's now my great honor to introduce our guest for today, Ms. Maria Fernandaespinosa Garcés, the President of the 73rd Session of the United Nations General Assembly. A warm welcome to you. Now, let's invite Dr. Mabel Miao, the Secretary General of CCG, to deliver the welcome remarks and introduce our distinguished guest in more details. Please welcome.
Thank you, Luo Yan. Actually, it's my great honor to host our distinguished guest, our old and good friend, Maria Espinosa Garcés, who is the former President of United Nations General Assembly. I would like to introduce about Maria. Actually, Maria is a distinguished politician and diplomat worldwide. And the United Nations General Assembly elected Ecuadorian Foreign Minister Maria Espinosa Garcés on June 2018 as president of its 73rd session, owning the fourth woman to hold that position in history of world body and the first since 2006. The president of the 73rd section of the General Assembly, Maria Espinosa Garcés, has more than 20 years of multilateral experience in international negotiations, peace, security, defense, disarmament, human rights, indigenous people, gender equality, sustainable development, environment, biodiversity, climate change, and multilateral cooperation. She has served Ecuador as Minister of Foreign Affairs twice, Minister of National Defense, and Coordinating Minister of Natural and Cultural Heritage. Maria is with very strong leadership and rich experience in diplomatic circle and United Nations staff. And we met Maria in different occasions worldwide. I remember in Munich Security Conference, Paris Peace Forum, even in Doha Forum and the Boa Forum for Asia. You are so active, and with a strong leadership, the world already witnessed your strong leadership and to active participate so many conferences deliver strong messages about the collective efforts for global governance. So later, I would like to invite you to have the CCG serious dialogue. And as Luo Yan mentioned, we have a lot of distinguished guests, maybe some of your colleagues, and you know them very well. But today we have a very special topic. It's about the inclusive leadership on global governance, especially the women's role in global governance. I think it's a very urgent topic for current situation. So maybe let's welcome Mrs. Espinosa to be the stage, and we will have the dialogue. Thank you. Yes, please. Yeah. Maybe, yeah. Yeah. Hello, Miss Maria Espinosa Garcés. You are warmly welcome to visit Center for China and Globalization and join our today's CCG Global Dialogue series. And as at the very beginning, we already introduced your rich experience on global governance. Actually, we met in different occasions worldwide. The world already witnessed your leadership through your strong speeches and active actions for the collective efforts for our world. I would like to ask some questions and invite you to say some words about your impression and your perspectives under today's topic, inclusive leadership for a fragmented world, especially on the women in global governance. So maybe there are several minutes for you to talk about this topic, maybe 5 minutes for that kind of topic. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Mabel, Dr. Lu Miao, as I should call you. It's such a pleasure to be at the headquarters of CCG. As you very well mentioned, we have crossed paths, I think, all over the world, whether in Doha or Istanbul or Munich, everywhere. And I think it's because we share the same purpose.
Yes, exactly.
And it's not a coincidence. It is that we have to be in the places where discussions, where decisions, where new thinking emerges on the challenges of new governance designs. And why am I saying new? Because I think that we stand at a very critical moment because we have created and designed organizations to serve a purpose. And the United Nations, more concretely, was designed and created after the Second World War with the purpose of, and I would quote, of never again. Never again countries, communities would use force to resolve conflicts. And the aim of the United Nations was to build a peaceful world. And we have a charter that has 3 pillars: the pillar of peace and security, the pillar of development, and the pillar of human rights. And when the charter was signed, the UN Charter, which is the UN Constitution, let's put it that way, 80 years ago, 51 countries signed the charter. The international community was 51 countries. And because of decolonization processes that happened under the auspices of the UN, by the way, that was one of the first tasks and challenges of the UN, is support countries in their decolonization processes. We have now a community of 193 countries. And only in the numbers you see that the world has become bigger, wider, and more complex. In that the new threats to our survival as humans have also shifted. Some remain the same, like the threat of war and conflict, but others have emerged. For example, climate change and the climate crisis. Others have emerged, like the new technologies and the use of artificial intelligence, increasing poverty and inequalities. We have come up precisely 10 years ago with this new framework and global commitment called the Sustainable Development Goals. Basically, the 17 Sustainable Development Goals have one and only purpose, is to combat poverty, inequalities, and bring a life of peace and well-being for humanity. And these might seem platitudes, but it so happens that these minimum standards of living are not our reality, no, for hundreds of millions of people that continue to live in poverty. So what we're facing now is the opportunity to reshape these institutions, keeping the core values to respect the sovereign equality among states, to solve disputes using diplomacy, in not violence or arm responses. And the issue of respecting the rights and dignity of people remain at the core. But of course, we are living a different scenario altogether. And the challenge we have is how we redesign these organizations so they can remain relevant, they can remain effective and solve the challenges of the people on the ground. And the first phrase of the charter, which I love, is "we, the peoples of the United Nations," meaning that we have an obligation, to deliver for we the peoples. And the main responsibility is in the hands of governments, of course. The UN, it's an intergovernmental organization, but actors have multiplied. The scientific community, think tanks, private companies, the role of the private sector is increasingly important. So this is a shared endeavor. There is a very dynamic, and perhaps we can discuss that later, Mabel, but there is a very dynamic movement around thinking about how to improve the systems, the mechanisms, and the institutions that we have designed. One of the issues is the issue of representation, the issue of women in positions of power.
Representative voice from women.
Exactly. And that's one of the issues, but also the issue of accountability, the issue of, transforming the decisions we take into real action on the ground. The Sustainable Development Goals are a means to do precisely that. And I think, as we were discussing before, that the younger generations, and I see a lot of young women, especially young men and women in this room, basically we have to feel like we are a global family, that we are interconnected and interdependent, that we need to put our energy, our intellect, our effort to build a global community that would be able to coexist in peace. And this is something that I think China has understood a long time ago, because China is one of the greatest defenders of multilateralism, of global cooperation, of international solidarity. When you look at the three initiatives that China is putting forward, it really shows that China cares about global development, about infrastructure support, about the well-being and the interconnectedness of humanity. It believes on safe and predictable global supply chains. So these are the issues that really create trust in global institutions. And I think that the UN really has to go through a major overhaul to deliver to the people it was created for 80 years ago.
Yeah, appreciate that. Yeah. Yes. So appreciate what you said. Actually, you served as president of the UN General Assembly during a period of intensified geopolitical tensions. Just now you mentioned you are assessing the current state of the global governance. The UN need the reform, and the current geopolitical architecture need to listen to more people's voice, and more people and more representative voice should be heard. And by the way, actually you mentioned this year actually marks the 80 years anniversary of United Nations, and China actually the first signature from China of UN chapter. I remember I saw the documentary when I was younger. It's quite impressive for me as one of the Chinese community. we are the supporter of the UN Charter as well. And you mentioned as well, currently China put forward three global initiatives on development, security, and civilization. Those are very, very important to building the community shared future for mankind. That is also share the core value of UN. From my perspective, UN is a peace project. Also, it's a project for the more prosperous world. So we cannot forget what is UN and what is the peace and the development prosperity bring after Second World War. So like you said, the young people should repeat it and review what happened in history and the UN's contribution. And I have some question. Can you further to introduce and how do you assess the current state of the global governance? And are multilateral institutions still fit for the purposes? What specific reforms do you believe are most urgent for the United Nations, other multilateral institutions, to ensure they remain equitable and effective approach, especially in the multipolar world?
Well, this is a very interesting question, because what we are witnessing, we are not in the post-World War II scenario. We are not anymore in a bipolar world. We are experiencing a, emergence with the great strength of many powers. Some call it a polycentric world, others call it a multipolar world. But what is true is that power has diversified into many hands. And what we are experiencing is high multipolarity, but low multilateralism in a way. And what we need to do is redesign the multilateral institutions so they can embrace this diversity and this redistribution of power. The core should remain the importance of international cooperation and of international solidarity. Why? Because we are more interdependent, but also more vulnerable as a human species. For example, if you look at the health sector, we know that our security depends on the behavior of the neighbors and even physically in your building, how the neighbors behave, on the rules and the standards, of course, but in the way societies respond to that. If we talk about climate change, it's not that the emissions on CO2, they stop at borders. It doesn't work like that. No, the environmental crisis, which is a planetary crisis, does not respect national borders. Whether we speak about the extinction crisis, the disappearings of species, whether you speak about air pollution or climate change, the deterioration of our oceans, everything is interconnected. Therefore, our response should be collective action and should be based on cooperation. And this is the core of a well-functioning multilateral system. Your question was, what are the things we need to change? And I think we should preserve the core values of the UN, the reason why it was created, to build a world of peace, of well-being and a dignity for all. These remain, I would say, the center. But then how we reach that situation, it's different because the actors in the international community are different. And if you look at the technological capabilities, if you look at the wealth in natural resources, if you look at natural capital throughout the world, there is a more complex scenario out there. So the things that need to change, I would say, is the way the multilateral system takes decisions, translate the decisions into practice, and this practice improves the life of people. This means like a no-brainer and even a platitude, but these are things that are not working in the system that we have today. What is the balance between the role of the General Assembly, which is a sort of a parliament of nations, no? Because it's every country, one vote, regardless of, how many square kilometers you have. It's one country, one vote,
Global
one seat.
parliamentary.
Exactly. It's sort of a parliament of nations. Then you have the Security Council, which main mandate and responsibility is to keep the world safe and free of conflict. And in that is also something that the system is not delivering. As we speak, there are more than 100 active armed conflicts around the world. So something is not working well, and humanity in a way is a custodian of peace, no? And this is something that also needs to be boosted. Currently, the UN is undergoing a very profound liquidity crisis, a financial crisis. One of the things that should be reformed in the system is the way we finance the system. How is that countries contribute to finance the system that is going to deliver, for humanity? And currently what you see is that if one country withdraws, the whole system,
Almost paradised, right?
exactly. But then, this multipolar world has to respond, in a different way, and the UN has needs to be financed in a way that does not rely in one country only, but has, evenly a more diversified sources of funding. And we have seen an incredible commitment and generosity from China. China is not only saying in international fora that we believe and we defend multilateralism, but they have made sure, that the fundamentals are properly funded. And not only in terms of how much resources you invest in the system, but also how much you contribute to the decision-making processes. And I have never worked for the UN, but I have always been connected to the UN. That's also an advantage. I've never been paid by the UN, but I have been ambassador in New York, in Geneva, president of the General Assembly, foreign minister. And I can tell you that the constructive spirit of China in multilateral negotiations is something that is highly appreciated. Because we are living a time of great polarization, of great fragmentation, and we need these bridge countries that basically broker wider agreements that are so important. Let me give you perhaps, Mabel, 2 or 3 examples. It is true that the UN is in trouble, underfunded, with legitimacy challenges, with trust challenges. But in spite of all of that, it continues to deliver. Just in May, for the first time ever, governments came together to approve a new pandemics treaty that is going to really make the cooperation in a pandemic situation easier and framed under certain shared norms and standards. For example, access to medicines, access to vaccines, and several protocols that are going to help. A few months ago, there was the International Maritime Organization passed a carbon adjustment tax for shipping, agreed by all countries. A few weeks ago, we were in Seville for the 4th Financing for Development Conference. The Seville Compromise is a very strong outcome negotiated by all members and basically committing to increasingly closing the gap on financing development. And here again, China comes, leading by example. And you mentioned the 3 initiatives on peace, development, and civilization. And these are not only words. There are practical investment commitments of the country to support the countries that are less privileged. And that's the core of multilateralism.
Yeah, appreciate your words. Actually, China has done and tried our best to give more budget to United Nations, but U.S. is still the largest budget contributor, but China is the second one almost in the P5. And I think what you mentioned is very, very, very important regarding the UN reform. We need to reform UN, but still we should appreciate the achievements UN has done for humanity. And there's no other kind of project like UN can be installed by others. There's no other alternative. So I think we should still uphold the core value of UN and the spirit of collective efforts of UN to promote the peace and the prosperity of the humanity. Another question is, you are the first female Latin American president in UN history. How do you see the significance of your role? How can developing countries, especially the global south countries, secure a more representative voice in the institution of global governance?
Well, that's an excellent question, and also, some good news. It's not only the percentage of each country contributing to the UN; it's whether you pay or not, also your dues, and but the increase in the contribution of China is extremely meaningful, because now China contributes almost 20% to the overall budget of the UN.
We should update my
Yes,
data just now.
and in terms of the peacekeeping operations, China went, if I'm not mistaken, from the 18% to more than 20% of the peacekeeping budget of the UN. So that makes China a very strong player. Again, not only words, but action. No, and this is extremely important. Your question was about the role of women and the representation of women. I am the CEO of an organization called Global Women Leaders. It's a network of women, former heads of state and government, former high-level officials of the UN. I have the privilege to be the CEO, and that's the reason why I sit in Madrid. My office is there. And we produce a report called Women in Multilateralism. And we track the 54 most important international organizations and look how many women these organizations have.
Oh, that's interesting. Data talks, right?
Yes. So, just look at our website and you will see we have been tracking this for 3 years now. And what you see is a chronic underrepresentation of women in positions of power in the international system. Let me give you one example. We tracked, for example, how many women ambassadors the UN has had in New York since the first, since the UN was established. Since 1947 until today, we have had 2,800 permanent representatives in New York. And from all of these permanent representatives, only 7% have been women representing their countries. And when I was appointed ambassador to New York, and we have in the wall of our mission there, the permanent representatives, the ambassadors, they were all men. And I said, well, when I leave, there would be one picture, but my hope was my picture, but then other women ambassadors. But I was the one and only until now. In Geneva, the same, the one and only. And in many cases, they have never had a woman. If you look at heads of agencies, if you look at the governing boards of UN agencies and boards, if you look at organizations as important as the World Bank, has never had a woman at the helm. So that there is a historic underrepresentation of women in the system. And it's not only because we are 50% of the world's population. It's not only that, but I think that we bring, quality. We bring different perspectives. We bring different ways of problem solving, and we bring good diplomacy
It's
as
part
well.
of the inclusiveness of global governance as well.
Exactly. No, absolutely. And it's not just to have the numbers right. No, it's also because we do good diplomacy. And Mabel, when you travel the world and you speak and you speak for the good causes of multilateralism, of cooperation, of better global governance, you know that you bring, a special
We
perspective.
contribute from our angle.
Exactly, and I think that's perhaps what the world needs right now, when we think about changing leadership. For example, at the UN, when I was elected president of the UN General Assembly, I was the number 4 female in 70 at the time 73 years of history, and the 4 women, we came from the global south. No, the first one was from India, Vijaya Lakshmi Pandit. The second, Madam Brooks from Liberia, from Africa. The third from Bahrain, from a Gulf country. And the fourth, and only from Latin America, when I was elected. So it was a great responsibility for me because I knew that I had to do a good job. Why? Because I wanted more women behind me and more young women diplomats also having the opportunity.
Wonderful. Regarding the women leadership, actually this year also marks 30 years anniversary of the adoption of Beijing Declaration. And 30 years ago, there's a very significant forum, a conference happened in Beijing as the women, international women conference. Last time in Boa Forum, I mentioned that moment my mom had a magazine on that forum, and I read that forum, that magazine carefully, and give me an impression that in the future maybe I have an opportunity to access the so-called global governance. So I'm so honored to mention that 30 years anniversary of this significant conference. Maybe in this October in Beijing, once again, there's a International Women Summit happening here. And I think what's your views on the past? We can review the past 30 years. Over the past 30 years, what happened for the women's responsibility and contribution, achievements for global governance? Do you have some hope in the future?
Well, first of all, I'm so happy that you were reading the magazines of your mother. And when I think where I was 30 years ago during Beijing, I was living in the Ecuadorian Amazon. I was living in the forest, working with indigenous peoples of the Amazon.
By the way, I should introduce you to our audiences. This is not just a senior diplomat and a politician, also a Amazonian expert. So you can introduce more about that. Sorry.
Well, no, in when I'm asked, where did you study? I studied geography, but where I learned the most, I learned from the indigenous communities of the Amazon, and it's real. And my work was with indigenous women, basically. And what I was doing, among other things, but preparing the first delegation of indigenous women to travel to Beijing for the conference. And I wrote an article then called Tracing the Beijing Conference from Below. And here are a small anecdote. There was funding, let's say, for 6 delegates from indigenous women of Ecuador to travel to Beijing. And these were women that have never left their communities, not even traveled to the capital city. No, so I was preparing, and believe me, they are so wise and so smart. We prepared an agenda, a platform that they came together with other indigenous women, because the Amazon is shared by 8 countries, as you know, Brazil and Bolivia and Colombia and Peru. They came together, a trans-Amazonian women's meeting, to prepare the first indigenous Amazonian women agenda for Beijing. So I wasn't. That's why I'm older than you are, Mabel. And so they said 6 funded participants, and I was, of course, the person coordinating. And I said, no, no, no. I will leave my space for one more of the women there. And I'm sure that they're going to find their way. And so I stayed. I gave my seat to another indigenous representative, and I monitored. And at the time, we didn't have phones, and cell phones didn't exist. So I was very stressed because I didn't know. But they basically
They
were
never
shining.
left that region, but they crossed
They-
the Trans-Pacific.
went to Beijing, and they were a big success because it was the first time that they found other indigenous women that came to Beijing. And I think that Beijing was perhaps the landmark of the women's rights agenda worldwide. The legacy of Beijing was so important 30 years ago. Being here, going to universities, having a career, having dreams as young women, it's also very much because of the struggle and the agendas that were built, during in Beijing. And I'm very happy to hear that there will be some celebration here to remember the legacy of the Beijing Platform for Action. And of course, the downside is that we signed and committed to many things. And the situation of women around the world is not the best. Not only the issue of representation and participation, but violence against women, salary gaps, overburden of care work in the shoulders of women worldwide. In situations of conflict, women and girls are the ones that suffer the most. In human trafficking, women that are trafficked worldwide, 80% are women. And women that decide to go into politics, there is a lot of violence against women that are in politics worldwide. You have, very difficult situations in many countries around the world of lack of opportunities, of discrimination. And it depends. If you ask the World Economic Forum, they will tell you we have done the arithmetics, and it will take more than 200 years to close the inequalities gaps. UN Women tells you, I think it's 150 years that we have to wait to close the inequalities gap. And I think we need fast track, no? We cannot wait 150 years, because we want our daughters and granddaughters, and we want you, the younger generations, to have the same opportunities and the well-being, and live in a world free of violence. And so this is a collective endeavor, and of course there are places where we are seeing regression in women's rights, in regulations, in legislation, and you see that instead of improving, we are going back. So I think it is time to celebrate the legacy of Beijing, but it is time to continue working also for women's rights, because it's not a given. And sometimes younger generations, they forget all the struggle that went into this. So you are where you are, very talented professionals, very committed young women. It didn't used to be that way, always. So the struggle continues, and very much, great enthusiasm to see that we are going to do a commemoration of the legacy of Beijing.
Yeah, thank you. Actually, I think once again to organize that event in China, in Beijing, is a good reminder for people, for humanity, that how hard, how tough in history women achieve those our own, our own achievements to reach our own achievements for our gender equality and parity. So it's great. And today our topic is women in global governance. Sometimes I always encourage my surrounding colleagues that we should access to the core of all the issues, including global governance. There's some data actually in China in the past over 3 decades, even longer. China has more than 40 million female scientific and technological workers that they are female. So it's a huge number, actually representing over 45% of total workforce in that field, scientific and technology. So I think STEM field, science, technology, engineering, those fields are very important for our world development, and China has done a lot of achievements in that field. And actually, there are more than 15.6% of all graduates are female students. So it means more female students than male in China. But we still review what's their employment and what kind of job they are doing, and in the mid-career, what kind of situation they are. So yourself is a model and idol for all the female to access the global governance. I think it's huge encouragement today in this occasion to talk about your story. Thank you, appreciate that. Later, I would like to ask another question. I know regarding the global environment governance, you are the expert and you play the active role for that. Last month, you even wrote an article to talk about how important the preventive diplomacy at the core of the climate change governance. So do you have some more words on that to talk about the global climate governance? We know that right now we met a lot of challenges, especially the transactional diplomacy versus what you said, the preventive diplomacy. Transactional diplomacy is prevailing. For all the things as making deals, people will narrow that kind of concept into a very small place. It's a deal making and no long-term vision for global governance. So I would like to listen to your opinions on this.
Well, I think that one of the challenges that humanity faces is how we get together to govern the issues that go beyond our national borders. In nature, I think is the best example. The Earth system, no, because yet again, if you have a wetland or you have oceans or a forest, ecosystems do not respect borders. So if you want to fight air pollution, or if you want to fight extinction and combat deforestation, and it's because we have a responsibility over the functioning of the Earth system. It's our life supporting system. You know, when people say we want to save the planet, and believe me, the planet can live very well without us, without humans, no? But we cannot live without the planet. That's where our food, our air comes from. And the truth is that what we have done, I think at certain moment, it was, a good decision, is to create conventions on issues, issue-based conventions. So biodiversity convention, climate convention, wetlands convention, migratory species convention, and to reach more than 2,000 multilateral environmental agreements. And the problem is, how is that you make sure that you comply with all these conventions? In countries, of course, China is a big country with great capabilities. I come from Ecuador, a country of less than 20 million people. We should hire half of the country just to report back on the conventions. It's impossible. And basically, we should overcome this issue-based international treaties and look about a more systemic way of looking at the Earth system and make the life of countries easier to cooperate, to protect, to invest, in ecosystem-based approach. And it counters the current structure of governance, no? And that includes, of course, climate. At one point, there was an initiative, when I was president of the General Assembly, there was a mandate to negotiate the Global Pact of the Environment, some kind of a framework of a big framing mechanism to help countries to work in ecosystem mode and not in issue-based mode. No? When countries have to report back on their NDCs, the nationally determined contributions on climate, this needs to be integrated to what they report to the Convention on Biological Diversity, to the Convention on Desertification, to the Wetlands Convention, have a more integrated approach. And we haven't come up yet with the solutions to that, but I think we need to, rethink. And when you talk about about environment, people think about climate, which is critical because, climate change is killing so much people, displacing hundreds of thousands of people. So we need to act, but you cannot act on climate if you do not create the proper adaptation mechanisms that include, for example, keeping forests alive, combating deforestation, combating pollution, air pollution. No, we know that 70% of the emissions come from cities. So there is a very strong component of regulation of cities regarding air pollution. So we are lacking a systemic approach. We are lacking interconnectedness. We are lacking better ways to collaborate. And here, you were saying, Mabel, what are the challenges for the current multilateral order? And the importance of regional approaches and regional responses. When the UN was created and established, this configuration of regions, of new multilateral configurations, issue-based, interest-based, regional approaches. I know China is leading APEC, for example, ASEAN, even, the BRICS that took place recently. So these are regional configurations, issue-based configuration, but all these regional spaces, all these ad hoc groups need to come up with responses. And of course, there is the need to have a global universal structure. That's the UN, no? But I think we really need to reassess the effectiveness of the environmental conventions, even the climate convention. We are going to meet in Belém for the 30th time.
COP30, yeah.
COP30, meaning that we have met 30 times and emissions continue to grow. No, so something is not right. And in some countries take the issue of climate change more seriously than others. And let me again put the example of China. China has a long-term plan, a very well-organized transition. It's the first producer and investor in renewable energy. So they act as they say. No, and this is a very good example because not all countries do the same.
I agree with you. Like very interesting, you mentioned the regional governance affiliated with the global governance. Especially at this fragmented world, I think we should renew and innovate the kind of global governance. Like yesterday, EU and China concluded a summit. They reached a very important agreement, is that EU would like to work with China on the green transition. The both sides bilaterally strengthen the cooperation on green transition, and would like to support Brazilian people to get a great and successful COP30. I think it's very, very important, like the two pillars of the global governance, EU and China right now, making the consensus on the green transition. And it's good for the global governance. Actually, everybody suffer from the climate change. This is a global issue. But right now, at this intensifying geopolitical tensions, the superpowers competition sounds like more exciting words. But like you mentioned, we should translate those theory and ideas into the actions. The EU and China, I think, make a good consensus agreement on the green transition, including like the EV cars, those renewable energy, how to spread it into other regions, like in Africa and in Latin America, how make people don't make anybody lagging behind. Digitally, also renewable energy, right? Those are very important part of our global governance. This time you visit Beijing, you can see so many cars with the EV symbol, and those are electrical vehicles. In China, it's very, very cheap, and China would like to contribute to the world. I think it's a good thing. I remember exactly in Munich Security Conference, some people complain China, criticize you are doing the overcapacity and dumping your EV ones. But one of the people from US, I remember exactly, he said, come on, if Chinese people would like subsidy the world on climate change and avert that induced climate issues, why not? It's good for everybody, every individual on the earth. Maybe some right, some wrong, but I still believe that, EU and China, those two pillars, like you mentioned, they are part of the regional um, regional mechanism. They can work together. It's a good thing for the world, good thing for the so-called preventive diplomacy, like you wrote in the article. Yes, very interesting. Maybe the last question is also regarding the young people. You already mentioned today there are many young ladies here. They are your fans, actually. You are the idol of the women's participation of global governance. Many people said there are more female graduates, not just in China, many regions actually on the earth, more and more female graduates. They with a higher education degree, but if you examine their mid-career, you'll find still they are in the lower executive level, lower than, on average, lower than the male. And it's called the man leadership. But in the global governance, you already mentioned we should have more female ambassadors to UN, more the senior executives in the global system, in the international institutions. What's your encouragement to the young ladies to participate in the global governance, and what kind of words and encouragements you want to share with them? Thank you.
Well, thank you for this question, Mabel. And if you allow me to just speak a little bit of the previous question and something I forgot to mention.
Yes, please. Yeah.
And sometimes when we speak about the need to reform the current institutions and mechanisms, including the UN, we think that reform happens because you write a document and you say this is what needs to be improved. We need to improve the way the Security Council delivers. We need to do a mandate review of the UN and just mainstream. We need to do more with less and be, most cost effective, and we need to do that. And the truth is, all of that is needed, but real reform has to happen in a variable geometry, kind of. I don't want to be abstract, but at different speeds. There are things that can be done now. There are things that are going to take a little longer. There are a series of mandates contained in the Pact of the Future that came out in the latest Summit of the Future last year. So there is a lot of movement, a lot of space and opportunity right now. We all agree that the system cannot continue operating the way it's operating. And we also know that there is no silver bullet. it's to fix the system like that. What this is a call of co-responsibility and of really having a clear roadmap on how to deliver. And there are urgent issues that we need to work on right now. And one of the urgent issues is the financing of the system that I was mentioning, no, in how to optimize and how to use better the resources we have, how to set the priorities right. And this is the responsibility of governments, of course. Member states have to decide, what are the priorities, and really change a little bit in the way we expect the UN to solve and address all the problems of the world. No, the UN should remain, in my opinion, the big factory of international law, because international law is basically prepared and done and delivered, under the UN. But big policy advice, cooperation, capacity building, guidance, and then to land the action on the ground to regional spaces and to the national responsibility. And of course, the oversight on peace and security. And when I use preventive diplomacy, it's something that the UN has failed big time. We're always one step too late, too little, too late. We arrive when the conflicts already take place. When we arrive when a humanitarian crisis already happens. And we're not exercising this capacity to prevent, to reduce risk, to prepare people and communities better, to be more resilient and to adapt better and more to the climate shocks, for example. And we should really work seriously on preventing. Preventing is less costly than to be always, responding to permanent crisis. And this is easy to say, difficult to do. I'm not naive, but I think we are in a make it or break it moment. And that leads me to the younger generations, because you have a big responsibility there, to learn from the past, to really do better than we did, that our generation did. And that leads me also to women's leadership. You mentioned, Mabel, that there are more women in universities than men, more women in STEM areas than men. In the world, in diplomacy, when I was president of the General Assembly, the cabinet of the president is formed by contributions of countries with diplomats. It's not the staff you have, they come from different countries. And I had two, I didn't choose them, it was the Chinese government that had the generosity to give me two superpower diplomats. Both were women. Both were women. One expert on human rights, and a second one was an expert on climate change. And they were among the super bright, super young diplomats in my team. I learned a lot from them. And the truth is that it is about opportunity and possibility. And I think we should never, never be afraid of asking for our space, asking for the roles we want to play, following our dreams. And I would be lying to you if I told you it's easy. It's not easy. For women, it's difficult, because we are expected also to be good housewives, good mothers, have different responsibilities, but that shouldn't be an obstacle, because we are experts in multitasking. And we know how to perform well in different spaces. In the world has changed in a way where the care work is better shared in the household, in that we can have career plans, that are ambitious, that are forward-looking, And you also have to think about even the generations to come. And you want the women of the generations to come to have more and better opportunities than you had. In the truth is that when I was appointed Minister of Defense of my country, this is not naturally, a job for a woman.
Defense ministry in many years ago, you were like it's a typical man job.
Exactly. No, even foreign minister, I was the first one, the first minister of defense. And of course, being a professional, I wanted to perform the best way I could. But I always thought I need to do a good job because I'm opening the door for younger women and the younger generations to prove that we are capable, that we deserve to be in spaces where decisions are taken, and that we have the merit. So never shy away. Be very careful about this imposter syndrome sometimes. No, women, we are self-demanding. No, oh no, perhaps I'm not well prepared. Oh no, perhaps we don't have, the qualifications, or perhaps I'm not ready. We are always ready, and we are always ready to take up the responsibilities that come to us. That would be perhaps a very humble advice. Never shy away of opportunity, and really fight for it. And perhaps, to share an anecdote of my mother. I have three brothers, male brothers, and I had something happening in school when I was, I don't recall, but perhaps 12 or 13 years old. As you remember the magazines of Beijing, I remember this. And I think I was crying in my room or something, but my mom knocked the door, and I told her, no, I had this problem. I was supposed to be whatever, I don't remember, but leading the school newspaper or something that is so important when you are living the moment. And she told me, listen, no one is going to knock on your door and tell you, here's your opportunity. It's not a given. You have to fight for it. In being a woman, and she was talking to me because I had three brothers and a father. No, she said, always, follow your dreams, and push hard for whatever dream you have. If you want to be a chef, a diplomat, an expert on foreign relations, like Mabel, that represents this country and represents women in such an able way. I have seen her, and a great admirer of the work she does. And see that we can do whatever we want to do if we have the energy, the courage, and we are fearless. And I think that has been a little bit of the push of my life and my career. And but when we lead, lead with generosity, lead with empathy. I would say even lead with love. That's what make the leadership style of women different.
Female characteristics of leadership.
Well, yes, and then you never regret. And believe me, if I saw, the two people that work with me at the cabinet from China, believe me, that they will remember me, not only because they learn from me, but because I learn from them a great deal. And my food every day, and the energy that I have, I get from my own team in Madrid. No, they're all young women. We try hard, but my team is rather small, but they're all women, except for the IT technician of the computers. No, but we did open calls for the positions. It so happened that I work only with women. It should be a mixed group, but for the time being, it's women. But yeah.
Excellent. You mentioned we should seize those opportunities through fighting for that, not just waiting that kind of opportunity. to reach you. So I agree with you at all, very much. Actually, it's not easy as a female, as a lady, as you mentioned. Um, like in China, I believe around the world, in any places, women are expected to be the thought with a thousand hands. You should do this, you should do that. You are expected to handle everything by yourself. Without that, you cannot achieve that. It means your ability is not good. So a lot of hopes for women. And yeah, we should fight for ourselves, especially in the society, even for the global governance, as you mentioned. Yeah, excellent. We have a good dialogue flow. Later, I would like to pick very quick questions from our audiences. There's some, there's some media people, right? From, yeah, there's a media person from which media can introduce yourself. Yeah, please.
The second question is about um, how do you um, um, recognize that United States has um, um, re, um, withdraw from the UNESCO? What is events impact for the global governance? And that's it. Thank you for your answers.
China takes seriously this year's 80th anniversary of United Nations. This September, early September, there's a big parade happening in Beijing in Tiananmen Square. So yeah, it's a huge event for China and for the world, I think. So the first question I think is related to the UN, and yeah, thank you. China's role in UN.
Will I repeat my first questions?
Yeah, no. I
We
got
got
your
it.
question very, very well. Both questions are excellent. The first question is the role of China, and it is not only the three initiatives on development, peace, and civilization. It is more than that. It is the very constructive contribution of China in the intergovernmental negotiation processes. China has been, and believe me, I've been around for decades, as ambassador and in all my positions, is a country that has always a very positive, constructive stand. It is not only the financial contribution that China is providing to support the functioning of the system, it is the attitude to contribute constructively, no, to the discussions and the negotiations and the decisions. And China is a country that always, respects its commitments, and that's very important. I have never seen China withdrawing from any of the multilateral agreements or treaties or organizations and institutions that form the system. In China is also has for a long time contributed to openly, generously cooperating with countries that are in need. No, when you see countries that are undergoing major conflicts or major climate shocks, the support of China always comes. So cooperation is a word that we have seen come through, no, not only words but actions in terms of investment, in terms of constructive attitude towards the negotiations, and we were only remembering the legacy of Beijing on women's rights from 30 years ago. Initiatives such as the Belt and the Road Initiative that has brought together so many countries with great development opportunities, the importance of China in securing supply chains. This is very, very important. Trade rules are very, very important, and not only for the big powers, but for the smaller countries like my own. No, we have a free trade agreement with China, and believe me, I mean, we are far away. Why would China want to trade with Ecuador in South America? But it's not only about how much do I get from this deal, is how much we cooperate. There is a spirit of true cooperation and generosity. This is at the core of multilateralism. You can. I have followed China. I think I have been to almost 20 COPs in my life, and I have followed, the commitment of China throughout. And when China says no, it's because they cannot deliver. When they say yes, it's because they can deliver. And I was part of the negotiations of the Paris Agreement. And I so happened to be seated next to Minister Xi at the time, which was the climate envoy of China. I not only learned a great deal from him, but I learned, how good, good climate diplomacy. And I know it's challenging. A country that has a responsibility to fight poverty, like China, that has done miracles in fighting poverty.
So 100 million people out of poverty in China. It's a huge number.
It's huge. So to do this and at the same time transition away from fossil fuels, at the same time invest in renewables, etc. So the power of China today as being the number one in renewable energy is not by coincidence. It's not something that you do, in 1 week. You do that in a long process of years of investment and vision. No, so that was your first question. So it's real, and I hope that there are other powers that follow. What China has done in all our countries. We have challenges. We are not perfect, of course, no. But if we keep our word, if we translate our words into action, if we show that cooperation is something that we care about, if we are always raising our voice to defend the UN and multilateralism, I think we would be better off. And I'm also celebrate this partnership between the European Union and China in terms of a just transition to renewables. And your second question was about the UN leaving UNESCO. The US leaving UNESCO, but they have also left the Paris Agreement and the Human Rights Council. And I think that one of the beauties of the multilateral system is that it provides space for dissent. No, countries that do not agree, they have the right to say, I don't agree, I don't feel this is good for my country right now, and take a decision. But they have the right to do that. There are even legal mechanisms to do that, to withdraw. No, it's not the ideal, but it can be done, and the system should respect that. Of course, in terms of cutting funding, for example, in the case of an important donor, the UN should be more resilient and well prepared, no, to face, for example, budget cuts. And quite frankly, it wasn't that well prepared. But this right to disassociate, to say, I'm leaving this because I don't feel right now that this is contributing to my country, I think it's a very legitimate decision. What's important is that the machinery continues to operate. And the countries, which is the larger majority that believe that UNESCO has done an incredible job, no, on science, on education, on technology, on regulating with the principles of ethical use of artificial intelligence. Just recently, that UNESCO has a long history working against anti-Semitism, for example. No, all of that. I think it's part of the legacy of these institutions, and we should continue to support that. And if at some point one country feels it's not on their interest, there are ways of saying no, and the system should be prepared to, accept and process the right to dissent. So diplomacy is not, an art to talk to the people that think alike. Because for people that think alike and have the same projects and agree on everything, you don't need diplomacy as much as platform to discuss, quote unquote, with the ones that think differently, that have different positions. The art of diplomacy is the art to speak with countries, groups, and individuals that think differently. That is at the heart of diplomacy.
Yeah, I really like what you said, the answer very, very with a strong wisdom. Actually, you interpret the art of diplomacy. Actually, I remember exactly in the WTO annual forum last September, the Peterson Institute president have a very interesting saying that he said, you guys can work together, move forward the WTO reform and the free trade mechanisms. Our US can prepare for a longer time and we can catch up. So it's very interesting answer, and maybe answer part of what she mentioned. And I really like what you said is that the spirit of the art of diplomacy is that convene different people with different ideas, make sure the diversity in unity in diversity, right? So this is the value of the diplomacy itself. So you are the senior diplomat. You know the value. You give us highlight the spirit again. So appreciate that. I think it's a fantastic conclusion our conversation and the dialogue, and it's a highlight of you as a senior diplomat with insightful opinions on diplomacy itself. Thank you again, Maria.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad to have such distinguished guest today be part of our global CCG Global Dialogue series. Actually, there are a lot of people listen to our coming up the podcasting around the world in English and Chinese, and they really want to listen to what's our opinion, especially your opinion on the UN and UN reform and global governance, especially particularly inclusive leadership for a fragmented world under women's leadership in global governance. Thank you, appreciate your time, and warmly welcome again with you visit Beijing and the CCG headquarters. Thank you all.
Well, thank you to CCG. Thank you, Mabel, for having me and for this conversation, for this incredible audience of young diplomats to be, young professionals. It's so encouraging to see that all the ideals of global cooperation would remain part of the commitment of the younger generations to work and commit to a better world. So privileged to be at CCG headquarters and looking forward to continuing this conversation.
Thank you, Maria. I think today your opinions already will be the seeds for those people in their heart. In the future, will be the forest of our global governance, as they are the young think tankers. I think it's a good encouragement for all of them. Appreciate again. Thank you all.
Thank you.